Good morning, colleagues. Just making sure that everyone is back with us. We are about to start our session 2 for today. And if someone can give me a thumbs up to let me know that you're hearing, would be fantastic. Okay, thank you, Brianna. Let me introduce myself. I'm Carla Aline, the Communications Officer with the World Food Caribbean Multi Country Office based in Barbados. And I will be your moderator for this next session. This session is focused on digital payment solutions and their potential role in strengthening social protection systems, financial inclusion, and women's economic empowerment opportunities and challenges. And for this session, we'll be hearing some contributions from rather knowledgeable individuals. We've got from the Government of Jamaica, Ms. Suzette Morris. She's the Director of Social Security within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. We have from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Miss Karina Johnson, who was the project specialist and project manager with DCash, which is a pilot activity within the central bank. And we have from the United Nations Capital Development Fund, Helen Gradstein. She is the regional digital finance specialist for the Eastern Caribbean. And representing our own WFP Caribbean is Miss Sarah Bailey. She's the head of program here with the WFP Caribbean Multi Country Office. And to give a bit of context as we engage in this discussion, I'm going to invite Mr. Riyad Kothkada, who is a program policy officer here in WFP, to give a brief presentation on the importance of digital transformation, some of the opportunities and challenges. So over to you, Riyad.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla, and good morning, everyone. Allow me just to share my screen with you. And so for today's presentation, we will just cover quickly the importance of digital transformation in the Caribbean, shed some light on the initiatives that have been taking place since COVID-19, and cover some of the key barriers and enablers to digital social protection for social protection ministries. And so when we speak of digital transformation in the Caribbean, we refer to the rise of digital technologies and the digital economy. This offers a unique opportunity for governments in the Caribbean to unlock new pathways for economic growth, job creation, and enhancing the delivery of public services, including social assistance. This involves a wide range of investments, whether it's investments in digital infrastructure, platforms, financial services, and digital skills to be able to realize that full potential of the digital economy. And in small island developing state contexts, the role of the public sector is immense because it needs to act as an enabler to stimulate and incubate this digital economy to occur. Because we realize that the market scale might disincentivize some private sector members from getting into the digital space. And so governments play a crucial role in that aspect. A large element of this digital transformation lies within digital payments. And it is important to make a distinction early on between electronic and digital payments. While we understand that there's not one single definition, but electronic payments are generally understood to be any type of payment that is not made with paper. So not made with cash or check, and is, for example, using your debit or credit card. Digital payments, on the other hand, are a subset of electronic payments, and it's where the transaction takes place on a digital device. So that might be a phone, tablet, a watch, and so on. This is crucial as there have been many benefits from both electronic and digital payments. They are faster. In some cases, they might be cheaper, more convenient to use. The process might be more secure, and they build up the user's financial profile and can be a foundation to other financial services such as savings, credit, and insurance. There has also been direct linkages to the increase in women's economic participation and empowerment by giving by exposing them to digital financial inclusion. And we've saw in Cheryl and Regis's remarks the importance of that as well. For social protection beneficiaries as a whole, digital payment channels can support more rapid, transparent, as well as cost-effective distribution of funds. We've seen that this has accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic, with governments throughout the Caribbean resorting to a more rapid scale up of their social protection. And with that, the digitization of both processes and payments took place. In terms of payments, just to give you a couple of examples, both the government of St. Lucia as well as the government of Jamaica embarked on the testing of digital modalities of payment for both their COVID-19 responses. And we've seen the government of Dominica, as highlighted by P.S. Burton in the earlier session, embark on the digitization of registration processes, data collection, as well as payment reconciliation. And so we're seeing more and more governments in the region move towards this digital transformation. Not only governments, but also other major players in the sector. So in recent years, we have seen an increase in the number of mobile wallet solutions and digital payment platforms emerging from the private sector. You see the likes of NBB in Belize, WePay in several Caribbean countries, Penny Pinch, as well as Endcash in Trinidad and Tobago. We've also seen that there are many public initiatives to advance digital currencies and payments in the Caribbean. And particularly, the ECCB launched its digital currency Dcash, which was the first monetary union to do so back in March 2021. And the idea here is to have a securely minted digital version of the Eastern Caribbean dollar to be used for transactions. And this is meant to have a safer, cheaper way to pay for goods and services. And I'm sure we will hear from Ms. Karen that will touch on that in the coming panel discussion. Just to leave you with a few key barriers as well as enablers to fuel our discussion. From our experience of looking at some hindrances in the region with regards to the digitization of social protection payments, we realized that the lack of data on key indicators of financial inclusion is a key barrier to evidence-based decision making. There are a large number of global data sets, but the data on the Caribbean is lacking. And this is essential for policymakers, specifically in the social protection realm, to digest such data and be able to inform their own decision making. The other hindrance is that digital payment services are still emerging and expanding and nascent in their nature. And so you get a low service diversity where it's a one-size-fits-all model. As these services grow and mature, we should be looking towards a more user-centric design where you have different products for different target segments, such as the elderly, women, persons with disability, and so on. We're going to touch tomorrow in the third session, in the morning session, on user-centric design and experience, and hopefully we can get some nuggets out of that to be able to influence the design of such products. Thirdly, and it's an issue that was touched on in the previous session as well as in the questions, and that is the lack of ID documentation that really creates a barrier for people to be able to be onboarded to such digital technologies. And so in adopting such technologies by social protection programs, this becomes a major hindrance. Accessibility is another issue that was mentioned during the last session and continues to be an issue between urban centers and rural communities, where you would have your branches, agents, and more comprehensive ecosystem in urban centers, but when you go to rural areas, that is lagging. And for social protection beneficiaries, there needs to be a level playing field in terms of access. And so this creates a major issue to adopting such technologies. Lastly, the affordability of mobile internet remains a challenge. We know that the cost of living right now is increasing, and so priorities shift. But the cost of mobile internet is quite significant. And for beneficiaries on social assistance programs, this can be quite an issue. Leaving you on a more positive note, there are key opportunities that we can use the advanced digital payments for social protection in the region. We highlighted just a few, but there are many building blocks that we can draw upon. The first is the high penetration of credit unions within the Caribbean. By looking at some of the percentages, this creates a huge opportunity for innovation. I'll give you the example of Dominica, where the Credit Union Association has developed a mobile money tool called Amlajan that builds off of the ecosystem that was or is present from credit unions. This creates a great model to adopt throughout the Caribbean and should be really looked at as an opportunity for digitizing this sector. The second key opportunity is that most social protection ministries within the Caribbean are looking at upscaling to digital payments. And so this creates a major turning point in piloting and testing these new modalities and catering them towards a more user-centric perspective. Lastly, sorry, I am not sure what happened here. Apologies. Lastly, the importance of investing in data and improving its availability. We mentioned that this is a hindrance, but could also be a major opportunity. When we do have financial inclusion data, this will help in the decision making, and social protection programs can better design their programs based on the data that is available. I'm going to stop here and give it back to Carla for the panel session. Thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them on towards the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyadh. Thank you for giving us that context. It is very interesting to learn that so many Caribbean countries are looking at moving towards digital payment systems for social protection work. It's very, very good to know as we continue to provide support here in the region to those who most need it. And I want to start off our discussion with going to Helen, Ms. Gradstein from the UN Capital Development Fund. And I'd love, Helen, for you to start off by sharing with us how would you describe digital financial transformation based on your experience with the Caribbean?
Sure, and let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm currently based in Port of Spain, and I think the tropical storm is just starting to move through. So let me know if you have any issues hearing me, but thank you so much for the opportunity to kick off this discussion and present today. As the moderator recently mentioned, my name is Helen Gradstein. I'm the Regional Digital Finance Specialist of the United Nations Capital Development Fund, covering the Eastern Caribbean. And to kick off discussion around digital transformation in the financial sector, as Riyadh had just mentioned earlier, and as many of us know, digital transformation is happening everywhere. And one way to define this is the integration of digital technologies into all areas of business in order to fundamentally change how you're operating your business or delivering products and services. And the same applies to the financial sector. It covers digitizing the business operations, strengthening financial and ICT infrastructures, and digitizing those back-end processes to drive a digital transition. And we see this now, just as Riyadh had mentioned earlier in the presentation, through these new fintechs coming to market, but often underpinned through faster payment systems, stronger broadband and network connection and coverage, affordable data, digital ID, open banking, regulatory and supervisory technologies, and what we're seeing now, the establishment of central bank digital currencies that will play an important role for the future of finance. And looking forward to hearing some of our colleagues on the panel speak further to that later. And this provides the rails to deliver faster and more convenient and more transparent and easier to use digital financial services. And the digital transformation in the financial sector also includes the transformation of delivering these financial products and services digitally as well directly. And we see the rise of QR and mobile-based digital payments, the wide range of mobile money offerings, digital banking, insurtech, digital currencies, and the rise of other fintech-enabled financial offerings. So these products and services allow for users to experience greater convenience and access and use a wider range of digital services. In particular, and what's important in this discussion, are those who are more rural, vulnerable, and who have often been underserved by traditional or brick and mortar business models. And so the other big piece of digital transformation, perhaps the softer piece that we see in the financial sector that really makes it effective, is the cross collaboration of a range of different agencies, policymakers, and financial service providers from across the financial, ICT, and other sectors that work together to implement digital strategies, digitize operations, and leverage innovation to offer these digital financial services at scale. And the digitizing of government social welfare payments for beneficiaries plays such an important role in this process. So we see these types of collaborations taking place among the strengthening of the infrastructures, the back-end processes, and the digitizing of the products and services taking place at the national level, which really encaptures what digital transformation is in the financial sector. And ideally, there's room to do similar activities and collaborate at the regional level as well, particularly when we think of the responsibility to protect consumers during this digital transition and digital transformation through strong cyber resilience, oversight, and supervision and consumer protection to help mitigate these risks. So I think all these elements can capture what the digital transformation in the financial sector looks like. And I'll stop there since I know others on the panel will speak more towards, the innovations that are happening here in the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for that. It's so interesting as you speak because basically what you've outlined is that this is not a simple process. There are a number of things that have to come together in the right way to really get to the point of success. So it's very good to have that context. And I want to go now to Karina Johnson and ask you, Karina, what would Caribbean digital transformation look like? And what are the low-hanging fruits that we can go after quite quickly to get us there a little bit faster?
Hi, good morning to everyone. Good afternoon, if it's afternoon on your end. Greetings from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and the apologies of our Deputy Governor, Dr. Henry. Thank you for that question. In terms of, from our vantage point, and I'm speaking on behalf of the DCash pilot team, Caribbean digital transformation obviously encompasses more than just finance, more than just transformation which fintech may enable or support. At minimum, from our ventures into this project, and this has been quite apparent, it begins with adequate and increased levels of broadband and mobile penetration at minimum. Within the ECCU, that's the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, while our broadband, our mobile penetration is comparatively high at 107%, broadband penetration, mobile or fixed, remains below 50%. And this is one of the areas that at minimum must kick off any legitimate attempt at digital transformation for our region. In tandem with this must be the focus on digital literacy for our population, particularly our working population, our governments, and in also both our youth, although it may not be considered as pressing. We also note that digital literacy is particularly critical for our elderly population, especially when we think of social payments, as this demographic would be among the segments who benefit from such payments. We, in tandem with this as well, would be utilization of technology by Caribbean governments to increase the speed of delivery of the provision of citizen-facing services, not only to our citizens within the region, but in terms of our wide diaspora who utilize citizen-facing services frequently and are a source of revenue support for governments. When we speak of increasing speed of delivery, we also recognize that there is the need to decrease the hardships, both in terms of the access to citizen-facing services from governments for our vulnerable populations, particularly those who may be in the rural communities. In terms of the ECCU, we do see wide dispersion and a bit of a disparity in terms of placements of our population between our urban communities and our rural areas. And so at minimum, this is where digital transformation begins. Of course, the enabling environment will always be the regulatory framework. And so while there have been various iterations of model legislation for consumer protection, data protection, there has to be across the board a minimum standard in order to have that framework in place at a regional level. Ideally, however, we would want to have a digital transformation in the Caribbean that also sees the use of technology, which helps governments as well as our communities to pursue the key mandates of the CSME. And just by way of further explanation, this is the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, an initiative of the Caribbean Community, which is the larger economic body for the wider Caribbean. And these key mandates for the free movement of goods within the Caribbean community, the free movement of services, of labor, as well as capital. And so almost right off the bat, we can see that embedding technology to support these movements, these mandates, to help free up and mobilize capital from St. Lucia to, let's say, Jamaica, from Guyana to Trinidad to Barbados, we can see immediately how that can be of benefit in really bringing together the realization of the Caribbean single market and economy. Of course, this will also aid in the movement of persons. When we think of intra-regional trade as well, there is a role to be played by the digital transformation of the region, because comparatively speaking, trade within the region compared to the individual member states' trade with the wider world, it suffers. And one of the reasons for this is that we do not have the financial infrastructure in place to facilitate intra-regional trade. And so in many ways, these are some of the key considerations at the sub-level, at the level of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, that the Dcash pilot is concerned to address within our own limitations. The Eastern Caribbean Currency Union represents 8 countries of the wider Caribbean. To date, we have been able to roll out Dcash in 7 of the 8 territories. This in spite of the hurdles placed by COVID, the COVID pandemic, as well as the consequential lockdowns. So essentially, I think these are the key touch points when we speak of a Caribbean digital transformation. In terms of the low-hanging fruit towards this endeavor, as noted before, um, mobile penetration, access and use of mobile devices is high within the ECCU, and comparatively speaking, is also high at a regional level. We also note and appreciate the work being done by the World Bank sponsored projects, which will see wider availability of broadband internet. I have to go back, and you'll forgive me, to Dcash. When we talk about the Caribbean region and financial innovation, a CBDC such as Dcash, which is a central bank-backed digital currency, represents a welcome midpoint between physical cash and the largely unregulated world of cryptocurrencies. And so I know Riyad mentioned earlier that one of the challenges, the impediments to digital transformation is the lack of energy or initiative from the private sector. And so Dcash in many ways and other similar CBDC projects, and I know Bahamas has launched fully their Sand Dollar, and we have, I think it's Jamdex in Jamaica. These represent an acceptable hedging of the need to digitize our economies, but as well as allowing for our Caribbean populations to be introduced to financial technologies in a safe, reassuring, and secure manner. In fact, one of the utilities of the CBDC was realized in 2021 when we were able, in the face of the Soufriere eruption, we were able to both launch quickly and deploy Dcash to enable the movement of funds to persons affected in St. Vincent. And so when we think of the challenges posed by just our geographic size, as well as the vulnerability of our economies, these approaches, public sector mission-led innovations such as CBDCs, really address these issues. Of course, there are challenges, and we see it with relatively new innovations, which are highly tech dependent. There are challenges as experienced by the Dcash pilot. However, what is helpful is that we are still very much in a pilot phase, and we're able to maintain a closed environment to a certain degree. And so we're able to understand what are the needs, what are the risks, what are the vulnerabilities which we must plan for and mitigate against. So just in a nutshell, those would be some of the easy wins available to us at this stage in terms of doing our part from the ECCB's end in helping to move forward digital transformation within the region and the sub-region.
Thank you. It's very good to hear that you were able to use Dcash as part of the response in the Soufriere eruption, and that's exactly what we are looking at, how we can use digital systems to really get assistance to those who need it as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I want to take us now across the Caribbean to Jamaica and talk to Miss Suzette Morris. Suzette, you guys in Jamaica would have recently done a pilot for digital payments with WFP in response to COVID-19 in Jamaica. And the question I want to pose to you is what would you say are the key barriers and enablers to digital payments for social protection programs?
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, if it's afternoon where you are. Just saying thank you to WFP for this opportunity to share Jamaica's experience so far in aiming to deliver better services to the vulnerable among us. So Jamaica has a fairly developed and mature social protection system guided by our Social Protection Strategy 2014. But as we review and reflect, we do see the need to modernize our services, and one of our major strategies is to move our beneficiaries to digital payments. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security administers three of the major social protection programs. So our social pension is our newest social protection program, and we are proud to say 100% of our beneficiaries receive their transfers electronically. However, the older programs like our flagship Path and our national insurance. For national insurance, we're currently at 65% of our pensioners receiving digital payments, and for Path, 40% of our beneficiaries. In recent times, the WFP has been partnering with us to help with strengthening capacity and also delivering benefits. So last year in December, we embarked on a cash transfer, COVID cash transfer, and outside of the major objective of delivering the benefit, we also pursued a mobile payment pilot with WePay, digital payment provider, and the mechanism was sending either QR codes or index numbers to our beneficiaries for them to redeem the cash. Based on our experience, both in the pilot and before with our established programs, some of the barriers that we observed on the supply side, we have observed that we are plagued by an inadequate or underdeveloped ecosystem with the network of agents and providers. There also seem to have been low customer engagement in the design of the solution. So what in sitting back and looking at the challenges we're having in getting persons to convert, we are recognizing that we made one of the major mistakes that we keep making at times in not engaging the clients in helping us to develop and to design the solution. We also see, especially for some of the more mature digital payment mechanisms, that there's an inadequate grievance, complaint, or support mechanism, which in particular for our path beneficiaries who had a key card solution, this resulted in quite a number of the beneficiaries asking to be reverted to vouchers. On the demand side, Riyadh said it earlier, we are observing that the lack of civil registration resulting in persons not having IDs is also a major barrier. We are plagued also by low literacy rates. We're talking general literacy, but more IT and financial literacy. And then we have some cultural barriers. The major one being just the cash preference. And we are observing a low trust for electronic payment mechanisms and service providers. On the other hand, we have an enabling environment, we think, so we persist with this strategy. One of the things on the supply side, we know that we have a widespread IT infrastructure and a well-developed mobile network. We have many service providers and options for electronic payments. So our experience, based on the fact that we seem to be an attractive option for piloting digital payments because we have this wide base with our 130,000 families on path, another 110,000 pensioners for NIS, that in an average year, we receive over 6 or so unsolicited proposals from providers who want to partner with us to pilot digital solutions. So in the environment, in the sector, we also see where there's an availability of the IT and the intellectual and HR capacity that is there. And a major thing is that we have the government buy-in. So the government of Jamaica is currently pursuing a financial inclusion strategy, and we see where the government is also seeking to assist with expanding the broadband network and creating sites where citizens are able to access free Wi-Fi. For the enablers on the demand side, the presence of the registries for social protection programs provides an effective mechanism to easily identify beneficiaries and also to assist with registration. And also our beneficiaries, there is a proliferation of mobile devices. So our beneficiaries do have mobile devices. And to our shock and consternation, Maria had pointed to it in his presentation that over 78% of our beneficiaries also in the pilot that we did also revealed that they do have accounts. It is just that we need to get over that mistrust barrier. And I leave it there for now.
So great to hear from you, Ms. Morris. It's fantastic to hear the experiences from Jamaica, and certainly congratulations to you guys as you develop your social protection system and incorporating the digital tools there. Uh, Found great insights from Jamaica, and I want to bring it into WFP now and throw a question to Miss Sarah Bailey, who's our head of program. So, Sarah, the question we are asking you is, in transitioning towards digital payments, how do we ensure that the needs of women, elderly people, and vulnerable groups are addressed? Unfortunately, Sarah, we can't hear you. You're muted. Can we unmute you?
Thank you very much.
There
It
you
wouldn't
go.
be an event. I'm sorry to be the first one with this. But what I was saying is, it's really a pleasure to be here and to follow such distinguished presenters and to join these really experienced panelists for this discussion. And I feel that this question is really at the heart of this intersection of how the opportunities for digital payments really intersect with what that means for social protection, because of course, the role of social protection is how we protect people in the event of risks and shocks. And these are often people who are living on the margins and facing specific challenges. And so one key theme that has been coming up throughout already is the issue of understanding. So as was just mentioned, there's the understanding of the payment ecosystem. So, how accessible are digital payment products, and, how widely are they used? So what does this mean for different people who might be using or accessing them? So a few of the issues that have already come up are the questions around how many cash out points, like how easy is it for people to take, credit that might be on a phone or in a digital wallet and then turn that into money, or turn that into food, or turn that into rent, or pay bills with it? What does that require to have this product in the first place in terms of a smartphone, an ID? How easy is it to open an account, and also to navigate it? I mean, many of the challenges that came up previously as well, there might be, a cash out ecosystem, but if there's a surge in demand, maybe agents don't have enough liquidity, which came up in the presentation from Haiti, or maybe there's actually a lack of trust, within this as well, which has also been a common theme. So the really key question when looking at certain, at women who may face challenges related to time owing to unpaid work and childcare and other, other things that are other specific, I would say, constraints and opportunities, elderly who might be a little bit less familiar with technology, and other groups who may have physical access challenges in terms of accessing agents or using products. So the question is how do these accessibility issues relate to the specific constraints, but also the opportunities of certain groups and certain people? So with time, if mobile wallets or mobile payments or digital payments can be done in such a way as to where it actually minimizes the amount of time that it might take to say, take a check and go to a financial institution, then we're gaining something for people who that's a specific constraint. If there are issues with familiarity with technology, well, how fixed are these? To what extent can accompanying people in these processes address this barrier? And that really speaks to one thing that Cheryl said in the opening, which is, well, it's not just what we do, it's how we do it, it's how payments are done and the processes around this. But also, there obviously needs to be some flexibility and choice when these barriers might end up being, particularly difficult to overcome in certain instances. So I would also say that one thing that I'm struck by with the presentation so far is how the people in this virtual room, especially those working in social protection, are in such a strong place to have the bottom-up understanding of the realities of people, their constraints, and what it takes for them to be able to navigate potentially these. So I think what we need to do is marry this, top level ecosystem understanding of payment systems and payment products. And as Riyad noted in the introduction, this is still it's all pretty new in some respects compared to, where we've had M-Pesa in Kenya for years and it's used widely by the population. But how do we marry that with this ground up understanding of the opportunities and barriers that people face? And so I think the final point to end on is, listening to people's preferences on how they wish to receive payments, but understanding what's behind those preferences. Is it an element of predictability? Is it an element of trust? And can that be, can that barrier, can that element be dealt with in different ways? Is it about the flexibility and accessibility of changing something, into cash? So I think we need that creativity, and that's also what we've seen a lot with, with these pilots, is how particularly governments have really worked with with the payment providers to tailor and find solutions, and that this is not set in stone. It's just the beginning of how we might be able to harness these opportunities.
Thank you, Sarah. Certainly, as we develop our digital payment systems within the Caribbean, the Dcash, the WePay in Jamaica, there is that need to do a bit of tailoring to the local context. And certainly, even as Ms. Morris pointed out, and yourself, there needs to be a level of flexibility, understanding that digital literacy is not 100% everywhere and it's not at the same level. So certainly we do need to have that flexibility built into whatever systems we use, and not let that be a reason to not attempt to have these digital systems in place for social payments, and really generally across the board as we continue to develop in the region. I want to actually go back now to Ms. Morris and to pose her another question. Uh, from the MLSS experience, when we think about digital payment products, they're not necessarily designed, as we would have noted, with the most vulnerable in mind. How do you think that governments and payment providers can work together to harness those innovations in a way that considers those unique circumstances of the people who are clients of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security?
Thank you very much for that question, because we are the Ministry of the Vulnerable. So we do believe that public-private partnerships can be leveraged in several ways to harness innovations for social protection beneficiaries. And I think it comes down to the big E, engagement. So first off, or right off the top, I think there is need for a unified social dialogue mechanism where we are able to consult and garner the input of our beneficiaries, both current and potential, for the design of products. We also need to collaborate more with the private sector in product design and to look at the population dynamics. These are our clients. We serve them. We know them most. So there needs to be stronger collaboration there. There needs to be stronger collaboration when it comes to public education, financial literacy, IT literacy intervention. So the partnership definitely needs to become stronger. When you have new products, the UATs, that's the user acceptance testing, needs to also include and involve our beneficiaries. And even in the piloting, these beneficiaries, we need to ensure that when we pilot across a wide range of beneficiaries. Also, for locations in building out the ecosystem. So social protection programs and ministries will have the information in terms of the critical masses for beneficiary location. So there needs to also be engagement and partnership in identifying locations to build out that ecosystem. So those are just a couple of the ways I think that we can partner to make it stronger and to get greater acceptance from the users. As the Jamaica Council for for persons with disabilities says, nothing about us without us. So involve the clients and involve those of us who serve them.
Excellent. Yes, it is really, as you said, about engagement and making sure that you connect with the people who are going to be the end users of the products, right? So certainly that's a perfect way to put it. Nothing about us without us. And I want to go and continue the discussion now with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Ms. Johnson, and to ask the question of you, what are the opportunities and challenges offered by digital currencies and products specifically for women? So let's focus in now on women in that context.
Right, so thank you. What are the opportunities and challenges offered by digital currencies and products specifically for women? One of the things that has been true in our experience in the ECCU was that the unbanked population represents a significant factor among our member states. These are persons who are not formally members of our financial system. And within this demographic, we do see women forming at least half of this segment. And this is for a number of reasons, whether it be because of unemployment or because they form part of what we have traditionally had as the informal economy. And so they are not able to meet the banking requirements to open bank accounts or else to maintain bank accounts, whether it be because of their inability to meet the minimum balance requirements, which many of our banks in the ECCU have in place, or else the volume of transaction fees or other fees attached to a bank account makes maintaining a bank account a non-viable option. And so when we have digital solutions such as a CBDC, a retail CBDC, we are understanding, and in terms of our design, it was created with the intent of, one, giving an option to unbanked persons to be able to, one, have access to digital funds, and two, to be able to place and store these digital funds in a secure and environment. And so in terms of the design itself, one of the channels that we have utilized for Dcash, for instance, is a wallet which is designed for persons who do not have a bank account. And so this ultimately manifests in what are the requirements for opening such a wallet. And in this regard, of any person without having a bank account can open what we refer to as a value-based wallet for Dcash, with one piece of government-issued ID and a front-facing picture taken from the convenience of your mobile device, a selfie. And with these two pieces of information, we are able to conduct adequate due diligence and make an approval as necessary or as allowed. In so doing, we at the same time are concerned to balance risk to the financial system. And so while we have lowered the barriers, and so we see this route, the value-based wallet, as allowing for significant numbers of our unbanked population to have a wallet, at the same time, we are aware and we balance out the risk by having lower limits in terms of the total transaction amount. This is something that this pilot is keen to understand whether or not it is serving the purpose in terms of facilitating persons and facilitating, especially our single entrepreneurs, our small business people, whether it be our market vendors, our fisher folk, etc., whether it facilitates them in conducting business. We are concerned to note whether or not the current tier levels, for instance, are realistic in respect of many of these traditional small businesses. In addition to this, because many CBDCs and Dcash are digital first products, a lot of the geographic limitations. For instance, we see a concentration of banks in our urban areas. And over the years, especially in the ECCU, we've seen a movement of banks, one out of the region and two out of our smaller parishes and towns. And so with a digital first product, whether it be a digital currency or e-money solutions, we are also addressing that hardship, the need for somebody to take a bus and travel 2 to 3 parishes in order to withdraw funds. This is another key area that we are looking to better upon with the Dcash pilot. In this way, what is important here is building out the Dcash ecosystem, especially in the early phases that we have on-ramping and off-ramping options. While we do not have a fully fledged merchant network, persons may have greater need to have their Dcash funds, their digital currency, realized as physical cash. And so this has been one of the challenges that we have recognized. And in addressing it, we are in similar vein to perhaps the M-Pesa model or even the telecom companies who offer agents who can top up. So you can be at an event, you can be in your own parish, you can be in your village, and you're able to take your physical cash, exchange it at an agent, and have your Dcash wallet funded. This is one of the ways that we're seeking to rebalance the geographic disparities between what amenities, what financial amenities are available in our rural areas versus what is available in our urban areas. Outside of this, and I think it was averted to earlier, there is an inherent skepticism, and for a number of reasons, when it comes to financial products, more so financial products which are enabled by technology. And, we have a naturally conservative, financially conservative population in the ECCU, and I would hazard a guess and say the same for the wider Caribbean. And there is therefore that need for a very high level. And I think when we initially launched Dcash last year, we did not anticipate the level of public education that is required, one, to surmount that skepticism, to help them to understand that Dcash and digital financial products are tools, and to help them to understand that compared with the volatility that we may see in the news or we may experience in terms of cryptocurrencies, that having a central bank backed financial product, there is a greater level of assurance and stability there. So this is one of the challenges that we are working to meet, helping the key segments of the economy to understand how Dcash can enhance what they do. Within the ECCU sub-region, for instance, we have a high level of intra-regional agricultural trade. So weekly, we see the boats leave St. Vincent and it comes all the way up to St. Kitts, bringing with it agricultural products for sale. And so it is incumbent upon us in pushing forward these digital solutions to help them to understand that these are merely tools that can be integrated into your present life. And the other challenge, the other important aspect of that is that we have to go some ways to make sure that we are not asking the ultimate end users to go too far outside of what they do in their normal day-to-day, that it does not force additional hardships or requirements on them. Key to which is, for instance, just the elimination of having to line up to utilize or to realize your funds in a digital wallet. So these are, just the initial challenges and opportunities, obviously, that we have experienced so far. This is just over a year in our pilot with Dcash. Tomorrow, we are launching in our final territory of the ECCU, Angola, whose population, again, will bring unique insights because of both their geographical situation furthest north for the ECCU, as well as the composition of the economy, utilizing both a good deal of US currency and also having a good deal of migrant workers. So we are keen, one, to understand how, digital currencies, digital financial products can add to Angola and the other participating members of the pilot, but as well at a regional level, seeing how best Dcash and other financial products can enhance the regional efforts at integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina, and congratulations to you guys on getting your pilot advancing. And I'm sure colleagues here will be interested in learning more about the experience in Anguilla and the other countries involved in the pilot. So please do share with us as you guys are learning. And for those of you in our audience here, I want to encourage you to put any questions that you may have for the panel in the chat. I'm going to continue with the questions that I have prepared and move now to the UNCDF and ask a question of Helen. Now, Helen, we know that even when payments are made into people's accounts on these digital wallets, there isn't a guarantee that they will actually continue to use those services or even complementary ones. So, what are the barriers to promoting financial inclusion among those receiving social assistance, and how can we actually address them?
Yes, it's a great point, and thank you for the question. And I'm pleased to hear so many of Ms. Morris and Ms. Johnson as well talking and speaking so well to some of the constraints that the beneficiaries are facing that's going to be preventing them from both accessing as well as using a wider range of financial services. So even before COVID-19, government payments fueled hundreds of millions of adults, and in particular, 140 million women, over 140 million, to open their first bank account globally. But just as you have mentioned, and what we have seen, and what others in this panel have seen, is that access does not automatically translate into usage, let alone adopting and using a wider range of financial services or digital services, and in particular for more vulnerable groups and women. And there's a lot of barriers that prevent adults and women from using their products and services fully. And, as I think Ms. Morris and others had mentioned, some are on the demand and some are on the supply. And I think there's always often a lot of discussion on the demand side bottlenecks, which are incredibly important, particularly around lack of trust in services or limited financial education. But it's also very important to remember the bottlenecks on the supply side, which are reducing that broader ecosystem and the payments ecosystem, which is needed in order for beneficiaries to really truly use their accounts fully and access and use them as a gateway to access greater services. And some of these barriers, which others have mentioned earlier, include the weaker coverage of mobile telecom or broadband networks or data ownership. So for instance, if you're a beneficiary that lives in a harder to reach area, there might be fewer incentives to use payment services which relies on mobile connectivity as compared to cash, even if you have the full knowledge that your money will stay in your account when connectivity is out, or that transactions can be made once everything is restored, or through USSD platforms. But it just might feel like an inconvenience as compared to cash without those strong networks. And in addition, women who globally have lesser access to smartphones, internet and data services as compared to men, this will continue to be a preventative barrier. In addition, interoperability plays a large role. It's hard for beneficiaries to easily send money across, different use cases, or to send it to different accounts, to friends, to family, to use it to purchase goods without this broader interoperable system in place. I think one of our colleagues on the panel had mentioned this before, but the agent and merchant acceptance networks is also quite important to increase utility, since otherwise, it's going to be very difficult, not only does smaller agent or merchant networks prevent or make it difficult for beneficiaries to cash out, but even just to think about the broader ecosystem. And without that network, it's going to be difficult to buy groceries or pay school fees or use your digital services more fully. And, and there are, and I think as others have mentioned, some reluctance sometimes for reasons that we have seen globally and global instances of, for instance, digitizing government payments, but into products that were designed to have, for instance, clawbacks, where if money was left into an account for too long and it became inactive, providers would claw back funds after a certain amount of time. And so in those instances, it made sense beneficiaries wanted to cash out quickly. So there's this larger ecosystem that includes the supply side issues along with the product development and service and provision that plays a role. And on the demand, we see other ranges of barriers. For instance, beneficiaries who might have thin identification profiles, particularly women who sometimes have harder time accessing different forms of identification, which we heard earlier. This will make them ineligible to sign up or use the fuller suite of products that might be available to them or access credit. In addition, in terms of confidence, vulnerable populations might not fully understand how to use their products or services fully or know how to complain or troubleshoot issues, and may have heard of instances or even been victim themselves of some type of fraud, pin theft, etc., which might be dissuading to use digital services. And these barriers can often be addressed through, or at least hopefully can be addressed through financial education interventions and strong consumer protections, particularly when the products themselves embed impactful financial education at teachable moments that focus on beneficiaries reducing their risk while also improving consumer protections and confidence, along with the responsible provision of these services by providers. So in essence, there's certainly barriers to address, but I'm also very encouraged to see that governments here across the Caribbean as well as all around the world are taking very concrete steps to address these barriers. And some of the solutions that we see are quite effective are continuing to build those strong digital ID infrastructures and supporting eKYC reforms, embedding innovations like psychometric testing or leveraging big data in new ways to help transition just account ownership into a broader suite of product, to make them eligible for a broader suite of products, for instance, those that might require a thicker credit profile. Universal coverage of mobile telecom and broadband services that covers the areas of beneficiaries will be incredibly important. Further developing agent and merchant networks that will meet the needs of beneficiaries, not just for cash in and cash out, but to make a broader make a range of broader payments. And then I think I've heard this earlier, but it's also very key to reemphasize the design and the delivery of the products. And it includes putting that human-centric and gender lens on everything and mainstreaming it across all aspects of the digitization process in a systematic way in order to cater better to these marginalized groups and design products and services that really meet their needs, which again can include embedding impactful financial education within the products and services to help people use these products with confidence, incorporating nudges to remind those to save, simulating transactions so that beneficiaries can use products with more confidence, including and ensuring that providers and agents have clear terms, fees, transparency, and that consumer protections are not only well understood, but also enforced. And also, I think one point that was discussed in the very beginning of the presentations, but also that I'd like to reemphasize is collecting sufficient data and continuing to collect sufficient data in order to help inform policymakers and private sector players, both in the design process as well as the monitoring process throughout this entire digitization effort. And I think all these elements might help stimulate and transition those from just cashing in, cashing out, and opening an account to really using a broader suite of financial services. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. It certainly is interesting, as you said, to learn the number of countries in the region that are actually exploring digital payment systems. And definitely we know that, the systems need to be user-centric. They need to be designed to support those who are actually going to be using them. And just for everyone's information, tomorrow we actually are going to have a session that looks specifically at that. So if you didn't plan to join us tomorrow, please do take the opportunity to join and take part in that discussion and learn a bit on that side of the whole system of digital financial payments. And I have my final question, and I do see that we have 2 questions in the chat, and I encourage others to put your questions there. We'll come to those shortly. But I want to go back to Sarah Bailey and to ask this question. How will the digitalization of social assistance improve the ability of social protection systems to respond to shocks?
Thank you for this question. And I think this issue on how social protection programs and systems can be used to respond to shocks is so relevant. And we've seen this with COVID-19, where every government in the Caribbean turned to social protection as one of the ways to support people who were impacted by the socioeconomic impacts. And we've also seen this in response to disasters, where it's been used in multiple times to support people who've been impacted by hurricanes, the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well. So, the question really isn't whether social protection is used in these events of larger scale shock, but how that happens and how we can, and governments can be better prepared for that. Because of course, social protection programs and systems are really designed for the day job of supporting people from the risks and stresses that they face throughout their life. So when we look at where digital payments could fit in, a key potential advantage is really that of speed. Digital payments do enable payments to be made from one account to digital wallets very fast. But for this advantage to occur, of course, there needs to be data. So the types of data that are needed would, of course, be, well, who has been impacted by this? Because perhaps there's data on existing beneficiaries of social protection, but what about those who are outside of it? Because we know disasters don't necessarily discriminate. So effectively, this came up in Dr. Dallaire's presentation as well, which is, one of the ways that data can be utilized is how vulnerability can be analyzed in advance of shocks. So what are the factors that make certain people more vulnerable to being impacted, for understanding their resilience capacities? And that can do a degree of preparedness for understanding who is likely to be impacted, which can be verified when shocks occur. So data is a key part of it. The second aspect of data that is quite necessary, and I should say that's something where Dominican Republic has been quite advanced in terms of having like a vulnerability index as part of its information management system. So there's some really interesting examples in the Caribbean that can be looked at as inspiration. But a second type of data that's needed is the operational data to reach people. So, do we have is there data on the phone number that might be necessary? Or if an ID is needed, is that information already there? Because if you just know, who is likely impacted, to make that combination happen, you need the operational data on how to reach them. And then these elements around it that were mentioned, there needs to be not just an ecosystem of them being able to use the transfers, et cetera, but kind of an ecosystem of trust, so that people trust what they're being received and have the knowledge and the ability to use it as a resource. And of course, there needs to be the arrangements in place in the first place, whether that's with as part of a payments arrangement as part of an existing program, or something that can be set up as a contingency, because it may be that that it's better to utilize one payment system, say bank accounts or credit unions, in the event of for regular programming, but that onboarding people who maybe don't have accounts or face other barriers could be quite quite lengthy in terms of times when a shock or disaster occurs. And so you could have a contingency payment arrangement. And if we really look further and think quite ambitiously about how this combination of vulnerability data, operational data, and essentially agreements with providers in place already, that could be done in a way that payments could be done so quickly that we can also look at how payments could be made as shocks or disasters are unfolding or are predicted. And this is often referred to as a forecast-based action. And there's been some really interesting research in the region by the OECS, the Climate Center, and others about the potential for forecast-based action. And what this combination could do is put people at the heart of that discussion by seeing how they might be able to receive resources very quickly when a disaster is predicted or unfolding. But of course, and this is an area where WFP is really looking to pilot this with government. So there's some really interesting ways that we could look at harnessing the power of these opportunities to support people who are impacted by or likely to be impacted by shocks. Now that's a very specific example, but generally when we look at that combination, the power would be speed. But to make that happen, there would be a lot of preparedness investments that need to be done. But I'm hugely optimistic that the experience that governments have gained with so much knowledge related to COVID-19, related to the lessons that they're sharing in the room, how this can be shared, for learning amongst different governments. So that just lays the groundwork for being able to seize how these opportunities can be utilized in the event of shocks and disasters.
Thank you, Sarah. Definitely, there is a lot of learning taking place here today with the exchange of information, and I hope that we can continue to actually build on this coming out of this event. And I'm going to turn now to the chat where we have two questions. The first one coming from Suzanne. And this question is posed to all of our panelists, and I think I'll start with let's go to Jamaica to start with Ms. Morris with this question. So the question asks, as part of digital transformation in the Caribbean, how have initiatives such as Dcash and the WePay platform as well been informed by gender disaggregated data and evidence? Is this something that your organization has looked at and acted on? And if so, are there any lessons or learnings that you would be able to share? So again, the question is, how have initiatives such as Dcash have been informed by gender disaggregated data and evidence? What have you learned from it, and how are you acting on that? And I'll start with the Jamaica experience. Ms. Morris?
Yes, thank you. So I would not have information on decks, but certainly for the WePay, I'd like to say that the gender dynamics in Jamaica is a little bit different because most of our social protection households are female-led, single female households. So most of the beneficiaries when it comes to households, especially with children, are female-led households. On the other hand, for elderly, we usually see our men who are the ones who most times find themselves in need of social protection. However, there is a reluctance for men in Jamaica, maybe a cultural thing, to seek social assistance or welfare programs. So as far as our intervention with WePay was concerned, beneficiaries were referred to us by our National Council for Senior Citizens and our community leaders and social workers. I don't know that I think beneficiaries were selected more on a needs basis. We did not, in the large part, use data or gender-related data to decide on our selection.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. And I want to pass now to Ms. Johnson for the Dcash specific experience with the ECCB.
Thank you. In terms of the design of the platform itself, we were informed by socioeconomic data, not specifically gender disaggregated, but in relation to who constitute or marginalized segments of the society. And this would have been key in the major design decisions in terms of the types of wallets. In so far as the key mandates of the pilot are concerned, I definitely see ways in which gender disaggregated data can help us to more accurately pursue, for instance, financial inclusion. And so we are currently developing an analytic tool that would allow us to, one, understand the types of usage, and so to better develop the platform. This would obviously also include information on the key demographics utilizing Dcash. We also have initially conducted research, market research, and now that we are at the stage where we have all of our ECC territories participating in the pilot, we will have a second study in relation to usage of the pilot, of the platform. And in this way, we are keen to understand, yes, the breakdown among the genders, as well as the other key indices that can help make Dcash better. One of the areas that we see this being of assistance is our design of the bulk payments feature. We have been working with a number of our government and government-linked entities. And so in understanding the needs of these entities in making these bulk payments, the communities who are recipients, the key demographics, and what are the capabilities that they currently have, as well as the current limitations faced by their present system, gender disaggregated data would be one of the areas that would inform the design choices of the bulk payments feature. So as the pilot continues, there is still a good degree of room for more focused data analysis.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And I want to throw to the other panelists if there's anything that you guys would like to add, ladies.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to add an additional point, because as the panelist mentioned just now, the importance of incorporating sex disaggregated data in order to inform the usage of its accounts. And I just wanted to also make mention of the great efforts by different governments across the Caribbean and globally, not just collecting this information on the demand side, but also on the supply side as well, by central banks introducing these indicators within their supervisory templates to collect it, to understand the difference between when we're talking about account activity and usage that's reported, you know, on the demand, and comparing it to supply side accounts and activity and inactivity that's also monitored at the higher level, to both inform the products and services that are provided at the beneficiary level, as well as policy making, you know, at the national level as well.
Go ahead, Sarah. I see you've got your hand up.
Final point from my side on this, but I think it goes back to a comment made earlier as well about listening and data, and having data that speaks to the, you know, the different challenges of people who may have different vulnerabilities, of elderly, of women and men, to better understand, you know, the different opportunities, challenges, and preferences is at the heart of that. And sometimes that listening also takes the form of discussion. So in just two examples among several, I'm sure, but in Dominica, the Ministry of Youth had focus group discussions with people who were receiving payments in different ways to find out, well, why is there a preference towards, you know, manual payments and less related to receiving it in other fashions? What's behind this preference? You know, are these factors that we can consider in different ways? And similarly in St. Lucia, you know, Dr. Dallaire was bringing up before some of these discussions that had been had about why certain products were seen as being, or why certain people preferred certain products, so related to security and ease of transactions and things of that nature. So I guess it's just that the data can come from a lot of different places, and that listening is always the key theme that I'm taking away from an earlier intervention.
Yes, Sarah, indeed, listening is quite critical as we work on developing our systems. And I'll move now to another question that we've had come into the chat. And I'll definitely throw this out to all panelists who may want to give a response. And the question comes from Danuta, who's asking, what system processes are in place, re social protection, empowerment of women, and to address the very high level of intimate partner violence and gender based violence in the Caribbean. So, again, I'll go to the question, what system processes are in place with reference to social protection and the empowerment of women to address the high levels of intimate partner violence and gender based violence in the Caribbean? Anyone wanted to go first on that one?
All right, let me just quickly try to say that one of the things that we try to leverage in social protection in Jamaica is partnership with other sister agencies. So we have a case management approach that we use. And as part of the case management approach, where we have such instances, we use referral with our sister agencies responsible for gender violence. So I think that is, and as I said before, largely our households are female-led on path. So the females are the ones who largely receive the benefits, but I think our major strategy there is through partnership with the agencies responsible for gender violence and referrals through case management.
Thank you very much. And it certainly gives a good idea of the fact that social protection payments is only really just one part of the social protection system altogether. And I'll just open up for any other questions. If anyone wants to raise their hand to pose a question to the panel, please go ahead and do so. We are heading into our final moments for today. All right, I'm not seeing any activity in the chat. Sarah, I see, well, now we see a hand and I see Sarah on. So I'll go with Sarah first and then we'll come in to Elisaveta, who's got her hand raised. So Sarah, go ahead.
Great. One point that I was going to make is that so many of the themes that have come up today are going to be addressed in tomorrow's sessions as well. So I'm kind of, I guess, switching hats to my WSP one, and really just to say that, really interesting session that'll come up around user-centric design and how people's views and the different experiences and lived realities can be taken, and understanding their different journeys and payment processes, and also really looking at the future of these questions as they move forward. So was taking advantage of the space to really just say, it's been such a productive discussion today and so many interesting examples, and there's more to come tomorrow, and we really hope that people will join.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, indeed, tomorrow's session, it's really going to build on what we've discussed here today in terms of engagement, making sure that you are actually listening to the clients and really making sure that whatever products you put in place are adaptive and can actually be scaled towards those who really need them. And I'll pass now, we have a hand up. Elisaveta, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you, Carla. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, first of all, to all these speakers for their interesting and very insightful presentations and contributions. I had a question in particular for Ms. Johnson with regard to the further rollout and expansion of Dcash. So one of the things that came up several times was, of course, to ensure that users and also beneficiaries can actually use their mobile wallets in flexible ways to pay for bills, to cash out, to cash in. And so the question I have to Ms. Johnson is how the ECCB aims to expand the merchants and agents network to allow for, payments and also cash in and cash out operations in the mid and long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Over to you, Ms. Johnson.
I thank you for the question. And this was one of the questions that confronted us once the lockdowns had finished. We were able to really take a new thrust in terms of promoting and increasing visibility of Dcash. To our minds, at least initially, we thought that here's a great tool. The need is obvious. However, from the end user's perspective, it is really where do I spend these funds? And so building out the merchant network, we saw quite early the need to have what we call our foot soldiers on the ground in each of the islands, making the individual pitches to our businesses, helping them to understand these are the advantages, these are the savings in terms of custody and security of cash. These are the advantages in terms of building, a transaction history, being able to monitor your sales, being able to have access to a wider market beyond your immediate market by being able to transact persons throughout the ECCU. So we have, and it's perhaps one of the ironies of pushing a digital first product. It really does depend on that face-to-face contact and communication in helping to communicate what we see are the advantages of a digital currency. So we have and we continue to build our team of underground support to bring understanding of what Dcash offers to merchants, as well as incentivizing our merchant tellers, who at this stage are certainly a very important part of the pilot. As we're here now, we're having queries from persons in the various islands. Okay, how can we on ramp or off ramp? And we have to ensure that there is that dispersion, as I mentioned before. So in this way, we have come up with an incentives program to help to bring some benefit to the merchants, of course, to allow them to facilitate cash in and cash out services. There is, of course, the immediate advantage once, the product becomes more popular, that any merchant who offers such services would hopefully see a higher volume of transactions. But in the immediate, while we continue to build out the network, while we wait for these network effects to kick in, we have found it helpful to add monetary incentives, paying a commission, for instance, on cash in transactions. So, and as we obtain wider experience as the pilot itself expands, I think our approach is really to listen and to understand and then to optimize. But this has been our experience so far in trying to build out our merchant network as well as our merchant and teller network. Our agencies function merely in terms of our KYC due diligence in onboarding customers who do not have a bank account. And we have some set requirements in terms of what are the regulatory standards that they must meet. So this has been less of a challenge than it has been in terms of building out the merchant teller and the merchant networks.